Have you ever thought that familiar habits might be quietly diminishing your quality of life? Imagine Clara Thompson, 72 years old, living in Asheville, North Carolina, where she feels her old age has become just an empty string of days. Things that once seemed insignificant are now draining her energy, blurring her relationships, and holding her back from enjoying life. But what if I told you that by letting go of a few habits, you could improve your health, emotions, and joy? This video will reveal 7 things you should stop doing right now to take back control of your life, from how you treat those around you to how you view yourself. These habits are silently pulling you back. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Habit 1. Stop accepting everything without question. Clara Thompson stood by the window of her small wooden house in Asheville, North Carolina, gazing out at the Blue Ridge Mountains bathed in golden twilight. A gentle breeze blew through, carrying the faint scent of pine from the forest, but her heart felt heavy. Her daughter Emily had called that morning, once again urging her to sell the house, where she had lived for the past 40 years, to move into a nursing home in Charlotte. "You can't keep taking care of yourself forever, Mom," Emily said, her voice full of concern, but tinged with insistence. Clara sighed, nodding over the phone, as she always did, though inside she was screaming in protest. She didn't want to leave the house that held memories of Christmas parties, her husband's laughter before he passed away, and the days she planted violets in the garden. But Clara said nothing. She was afraid of upsetting Emily, of being seen as selfish, of shattering the fragile peace between them. This wasn't the first time Clara had given in. For years she had grown used to agreeing to keep the peace. When her children were young, she nodded to their every request, from skipping her lunch break to drive them to soccer practice, to staying silent when they argued over their father's inheritance money. Now, at 72, Clara realized this habit had become ingrained in her. She nodded to the doctor when he prescribed medication she didn't fully understand, agreed to the neighbors when they asked her to watch their dog, despite her exhaustion, and now to Emily, about her own house. But each time she said yes, Clara felt a part of herself slip away, as if she were handing over control of her life, bit by bit. This habit isn't uncommon in America, especially among older adults like Clara. The culture here often quietly expects seniors to be easygoing, to yield to avoid conflict. According to a report from AARP, over 60% of people over 65 admit they've agreed to something just to avoid an argument, even if it made them uncomfortable. For Clara, each nod was a crack in the wall of her self-respect. She remembered when Emily suggested she stop driving, because your age isn't suitable anymore. Clara knew she was still a good driver. She hadn't had an accident in 50 years behind the wheel, but she handed over her keys to her daughter, just to avoid a fight. The result? She lost the freedom to go shopping, visit friends, or simply drive to see the mountains on weekends. The more she thought about it, the more it hurt Clara. She no longer recognized herself. Where was the woman who once stood firm in the emergency room, making life-saving decisions as a nurse? She wondered if she was turning into a shadow, living by others' wishes just to avoid conflict. The truth was, every time she stayed silent, she wasn't just keeping the peace with others, she was losing peace within her own soul. A sense of helplessness surged, like a silent wave drowning her. She wanted to scream, to say no, to Emily, but the fear of her daughter pulling away, of being judged, held her back. But today, something shifted. After hanging up with Emily, Clara saw the family photo hanging on the wall. Her husband and their kids at a picnic in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She remembered how strong she'd been, how steadfast she'd stood to protect her family through tough times. So why was she now letting others dictate her life? It hit her. Age didn't diminish the value of her voice. On the contrary, 72 years of life experience had given her a wisdom no one could deny. She didn't need to stay silent to prove her love for her children, or her kindness to others. She deserved to speak up, to be respected. Clara decided to act. She searched online and signed up for a senior support group in Asheville, where she could learn to express herself without guilt. The first meeting took place at the community center on Patton Avenue. Sitting among peers, Clara listened as an older woman named Ruth shared how she'd refused her son's suggestion to sell her house to live true to her own desires. Ruth said, I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to live. Those words woke Clara up. She realized keeping the peace wasn't worth sacrificing herself. That evening, Clara called Emily back. With a trembling but firm voice, she said, "I'm not selling the house, sweetheart. This is where I belong." Emily was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I'm just worried about you, Mom." Clara smiled. "I know, but I need to take care of myself too." The conversation wasn't easy. Emily wasn't happy, but Clara felt lighter. For the first time in years, she didn't nod just to please someone. She had reclaimed her voice. Stopping the habit of accepting everything without question wasn't just about changing a behavior. It was how Clara took back control of her life. She understood that her wisdom, built over decades, was a precious asset. She didn't need to stay silent for peace, because true peace came from living authentically. Here, if you're like Clara, try this small step. Say no to something you don't want. Just once. You'll be amazed at how your voice resonates, opening the door to the freedom and happiness you deserve. Habit 2. Stop isolating yourself socially. In another corner of America, far from Clara Thompson's Asheville, North Carolina, Henry Brooks, 68, sat alone in his small wooden house in Boise, Idaho. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting light on his wrinkled face, but it wasn't enough to dispel the chill enveloping his soul. Outside, winter wind swept across snow-covered fields, carrying a distant howl he'd once known well as a Marine. Now, he lived alone, far from those vibrant days, and seemingly far from the world. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from the Boise Veterans Club, inviting him to their monthly meetup at the cafe on Main Street. Cheered, Henry glanced at it, then turned it off. "I don't fit in those places anymore," he muttered, as if convincing himself. Henry hadn't always been this way. He used to be outgoing, cracking jokes at local bar gatherings, or leading camping trips along the Boise River. But since his wife died 5 years ago from cancer, Henry had pulled back. He turned down fishing invites from old squad mates, ignored texts from his kids now living in Seattle, and rarely left the house, unless he ran out of food. He thought socializing at his age would just tire him out more. "Who needs me now?" he asked himself, staring at the dusty family photo on the shelf. Him, his wife, and their 2 kids beaming during a Yellowstone trip. But that isolation was quietly taking more from Henry than he realized. He didn't know that each day spent in silence distanced him, not just from others, but from himself. Mornings brought a heaviness, not from age but from an emptiness creeping into his heart. Sometimes, he heard neighbors' laughter through the thin walls, and an unnamed sadness welled up. He missed the banter over beers, the pats on the back from friends, but told himself, not now. He didn't realize how common this retreat was in America. According to the National Institutes of Health, NIH, over 40% of people over 65 experience prolonged loneliness, harming not just their minds but their bodies too. Social isolation isn't just an emotional issue. It has clear physical consequences. NIH studies show that a lack of social connection raises the risk of heart disease, depression, and even cognitive decline. The human brain is wired to interact, to laugh, share, feel companionship. When Henry declined the Veterans Club invite, he wasn't just skipping coffee. He was denying the mental nourishment his body and mind craved. He started noticing signs: restless sleep, hazy memories of old days, and unexplained chest pains. His doctor had warned him about high blood pressure, but Henry brushed it off. "I'm fine." He didn't know that fine was a facade, hiding a heart crying out for connection. One afternoon, as snow fell thicker outside, Henry turned on the TV and stumbled on a PBS documentary about senior health. The host said, "Loneliness kills us more slowly than any disease." The words hit him like a punch. He recalled his wife's last words. "Don't let me be your whole world, Henry. Keep living for you, for others." She'd nodded to comfort her then, but now he wondered, was he betraying that promise? He didn't want to admit it, but isolation was turning him into a stranger to his friends and himself. The next day, Henry decided to try. He picked up the phone and called Tom, an old Veterans Club buddy. "Can I join this week's meetup?" he asked, voice shaky. Tom laughed. "You're 5 years late, but always welcome." That Saturday, Henry put on his old coat, stepped out for the first time in months, and went to the cafe on Main Street. He sat awkwardly with Tom and a few others. At first he stayed quiet, listening to tales of military days, family, and recent football games. Then Tom asked, "Remember when we got lost in the Idaho woods?" Henry chuckled, recounting details he didn't think he'd retained. Laughter erupted around the table, and for the first time in years, Henry felt warmth, not from the fire, but from connection. That meetup didn't instantly make Henry extroverted. He still enjoyed his quiet moments. But he started small changes. He joined the Wednesday walking group at Ann Morrison Park, where seniors chatted about weather and grandkids. He video called his kids in Seattle, just for a few minutes, and their smiles eased his heart. He realized connection didn't have to be loud or complicated. A short talk, a nod on the street, was enough to chase away loneliness. Stopping social isolation didn't mean Henry had to completely change who he was. It was about letting himself live among others, even just a little. For Clara in Asheville, reclaiming her voice opened the door to freedom. For Henry, stepping outside opened the door to joy. If you're locking yourself away like Henry, try one small step. Call a friend, join a local meetup, or just smile at someone. The world's still waiting, and you deserve to be part of it. Habit 3. Stop neglecting your physical health. Farther southwest in America. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, Margaret Maggie Ortiz, 75, sat on a wooden bench outside her home, looking out at the bustling plaza square under the afternoon sun. The aroma of roasted red chiles from the nearby farmer's market wafted by, but Maggie had little interest in savoring it. Her legs ached with every step, and her breath grew labored after just a few minutes strolling the yard. She'd once been a talented chef, standing for hours in a local restaurant kitchen making tamales for tourists and locals alike. But now, at 75, Maggie told herself, "I'm old, why bother with health?" She skipped the walks she used to love, swapped breakfast for pastries from the nearby shop, and put off her doctor's appointment for 3 months, because it's not a big deal. Maggie wasn't alone in thinking this. In America, many seniors like her see age as an excuse to let health slide. For Maggie, that mindset started when she retired 10 years ago. She'd once prided herself on her stamina, hauling heavy cornmeal sacks or standing all day in the kitchen without tiring. But now, her body had changed. Her hands trembled holding pots, her knees creaked each morning, and she often felt exhausted despite doing little. That's normal at this age, she reassured herself, dismissing thoughts of exercise or healthy eating. She convinced herself small changes wouldn't matter, that her body had passed its prime. But reality was quietly knocking. One morning, Maggie decided to walk to the plaza square for some vegetables from the farmer's market, a few hundred yards she'd once covered with ease. Halfway there, she stopped, leaning against an old oak, gasping for air. The crowd around her, vendors, tourists, and even spry seniors, made her feel out of place. She recalled her doctor's words from her last visit a year ago. Maggie, you need to move and eat better, or you'll face big trouble." She'd laughed it off then, but now, this weakness made her wonder, was she hurting herself? Maggie's neglect wasn't just personal, it mirrored a broader issue in America. According to the National Institutes of Health, NIH, over 50% of people over 70 don't meet the minimum activity level needed, and poor diets heighten risks of chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease. For Maggie, the signs were clear: drained energy, persistent joint pain, and irritability. She blamed on age. She didn't know the human body, even at 75, could recover remarkably with proper care. An NIH study shows just 20 minutes of daily walking can boost muscle strength, lower fall risks, and lift mood, things Maggie longed for without realizing. Everything shifted one Saturday when her granddaughter Sophia visited from Albuquerque. Sophia, a 30-year-old yoga instructor, saw Maggie shuffling into the kitchen and said, "Grandma, why don't you walk with me, just around the square?" Maggie shook her head. "I'm too old for that." But Sophia wouldn't give up. She coaxed Maggie outside, guiding her slowly around the plaza, chatting about her yoga classes. For the first time in months, Maggie felt fresh air fill her lungs, even if she only made it halfway. Sophia grinned. "See? You did it." Maggie reluctantly admitted she felt a bit better. The next day, Maggie tried again on her own. She walked 10 minutes around the house, leaning on her late husband's old cane for balance. Though slow, she felt her legs lighten, as if her body were whispering thanks. She started watching her meals, swapping morning pastries for oatmeal with market fruit, drinking water instead of strong coffee. She called to schedule a doctor's visit. No more delays. The doctor was surprised to see her blood pressure stabilize after 2 weeks of small changes. "You're on the right track," he said, and Maggie smiled, proud of her body for the first time at this age. Those changes didn't just affect her physically. Maggie noticed that as her body grew stronger, her mind cleared too. She chatted with market vendors, joking about spicy salsa recipes, something she'd avoided when tired. She no longer felt like a useless old woman. She felt valuable, capable of living well. One afternoon, she even joined a gentle exercise class for seniors at the Santa Fe Community Center. Meeting new friends as they danced to mariachi music, laughter rang out, and Maggie was amazed her joints didn't ache as much. Stopping the neglect of her health wasn't about returning to her 40s. It was honoring the body that had carried her through 75 years. For Clara in Asheville, reclaiming her voice was the start. For Henry in Boise, social connection was key. For Maggie, caring for her health brought back her vitality. She learned it's never too late to start. A walk, a healthy meal, or a doctor's visit can change everything. If you're like Maggie, don't let age be a barrier. Try one small change today. Your body will thank you, and you'll see how much life you still have ahead. Habit 4. Stop living in the past. Beneath the golden sunset, along the Savannah River in Georgia, James Carter, 70, sat on an old armchair on his porch, watching the water drift lazily by. The cries of seagulls mingled with the faint salty scent from the river's mouth. But James's gaze seemed lost in a distant place. He remembered his days as a railroad engineer for Norfolk Southern, driving long trains through Georgia's grasslands, the whistle echoing like the heartbeat of his life back then. Now retired for 8 years, James lived alone in a small wooden house by the river, once filled with the laughter of his wife and 2 sons, now grown and settled in Atlanta. But instead of embracing the present, he let his mind drift to the past, glorious days he believed would never return. James didn't mean to live in memories. It just came naturally, like a habit. Each morning, he brewed coffee, sat on the porch, and let his thoughts wander to repairing tracks under the scorching summer sun, or evenings, telling his kids about night train runs. He even recalled nearly missing a train because he was caught up playing poker with coworkers at a bar near the station. Those memories were sweet, but they were also an invisible tether binding him. When a neighbor invited him to a drawing class at the Savannah Community Center, he declined. "I'm not good at that stuff." When his son called suggesting a visit to Atlanta to see the grandkids, he made excuses. "I'm tired, maybe next time." In truth, he feared leaving this porch, the place where he felt closest to the past. But dwelling in memories was taking more from James than he realized. He didn't see that each day passing, he missed new opportunities, moments that could bring joy right now. One afternoon, as he sat gazing at the river, he heard kids laughing while playing basketball at a nearby park. The sound reminded him of his own children, when they were young, but it also left him feeling empty. He wondered, what am I doing with my time? He realized that no matter how beautiful the past was, it couldn't replace the present. But breaking this habit wasn't easy. In America, many seniors like James fall into the trap of nostalgia, believing their best days are behind them. With an AARP survey showing over 30% of people over 65 often live in memories rather than the present. That nostalgia came at a cost. For James, it blurred the possibilities around him. He'd once seen a flyer for a historical tour around Savannah, exploring cobblestone streets and colonial homes he'd never noticed, despite living there his whole life. But he brushed it off. What's so great about that? He didn't know his mind, stuck in the past, was keeping him from new experiences, things that could enrich his current life. Regret became a constant companion. He wished he'd learned to draw when he was younger, wished he'd spent more time with his wife before she passed from a stroke 10 years ago. But instead of acting to create new memories, he sank into what couldn't be changed. Everything shifted one evening, when James turned on the TV and watched a History Channel show about old trains. The host said, "The past teaches us, but the present is where we live." Those words pierced the fog in James's mind, like a beam of light. He looked around his house, the dusty photos, the empty chair where his wife once sat, and asked himself, do I want to keep going like this? He recalled her words when she was alive. James, don't just look back, look ahead. He'd laughed then, but now he understood she wanted him to keep living, not just exist. The next day, James decided to try something new. He picked up the flyer about the drawing class the neighbor had left the week before. With some hesitation, he put on his cleanest shirt, stepped out and walked to the old building on Bull Street. The class had just a few other seniors, and the teacher, a middle-aged woman named Ellen, greeted him with a warm smile. Welcome, take it easy. James clumsily held the brush, painting a crooked curve, meant to be the Savannah River. He laughed aloud when Ellen praised. That's a great start. For the first time in years, he felt relief, not from the drawing, but from doing something for the present. From there, James began changing, bit by bit. He joined the historical tour around Savannah, surprised by how beautiful the old streets were. He video called his son in Atlanta, promising to visit for Thanksgiving to play with the grandkids. He even bought an old guitar from a second-hand shop, practicing simple chords he'd dreamed of learning when young. Each small act pulled him from the past, bringing him closer to the life he had now. He no longer sat for hours on the porch reminiscing. Instead, he got up, stepped outside, and let himself experience. Stopping living in the past didn't mean James forgot those old days. It was about keeping memories in their place, as lessons, not a prison. For Clara, her voice brought freedom. For Henry, connection brought joy. For Maggie, health brought vitality. For James, the present brought hope. If you're like James, don't let the past define you. Try something new today. A class, a trip, or just a call to a loved one. The present is all you have, and it's still full of wonderful things waiting for you to discover. Habit 5. Stop sacrificing your happiness for others. In Portland, Oregon, where gentle rain falls on streets shaded by maple trees, Evelyn Harper, 73, sat on an old sofa in her living room, hands clasped tightly. The TV blared with cartoons her grandson, Liam, watched on the floor. Evelyn had just cleaned the kitchen after making sandwiches for Liam, though her legs ached after a long day caring for the 5-year-old. Her son Daniel, who worked at a tech company near downtown, often asked her to watch Liam, because you're not busy at home anyway, right, Mom? Evelyn always nodded, smiled, though inside she longed to sit with a cup of tea and the book she hadn't opened since last week. She thought it was her duty, as a mother, a grandmother, to always put family first. Evelyn was no stranger to sacrifice. For 40 years, as an elementary school teacher, she'd grown used to setting aside her own needs. She'd skipped coffee dates with friends to grade papers, spent weekends prepping lesson plans instead of resting. When she retired, she thought she'd have time for herself, but then Daniel and his wife Sarah had Liam. Evelyn became an unpaid babysitter, morning to night, though her body wasn't as strong anymore. She loved Liam. His bright eyes and mischievous grin melted her heart, but she started feeling drained. Each day she felt more like a service machine than a person with her own desires. That habit of sacrifice isn't rare in America. Many seniors like Evelyn feel their worth lies in what they can do for others. According to an AARP study, over 45% of people over 65 say they regularly put family needs above their own, even when it harms their health and happiness. For Evelyn, every chore to Daniel meant missing chances to rest, pursue hobbies, or simply enjoy quiet. She dreamed of learning pottery at the Portland Community Center, but the thought of leaving Liam to go made her feel guilty. My son needs me, she told herself, though Daniel never asked if she wanted a break. But that sacrifice cost more than Evelyn realized. One rainy afternoon, as Liam ran around spilling water on the floor, Evelyn bent to clean it, and a sharp pain shot down her spine. She sank into a chair, panting, while Liam cheerfully shouted, "Grandma, play more." Evelyn gave a weak smile, but a strange feeling rose inside, not anger, but a deep sadness. She remembered teaching days when she stood before her class full of energy, or evenings with her husband, who passed 7 years ago, listening to rain at the window. Now, she felt herself fading, bit by bit, to please others. Worse, Daniel and Sarah began taking Evelyn's sacrifices for granted. They didn't notice how tired she was chasing Liam all day, how her hands shook lifting him. Once, when Evelyn ventured I need a day off. Daniel laughed. You're retired, Mom. What's there to rest from? The words cut like a knife. Evelyn realized she'd unintentionally taught her family her needs didn't matter. She didn't blame Daniel. He was used to her always being there. But she wondered, when do I get to live for me? Everything changed one morning when Evelyn watched a show on OPB Oregon's public station about senior mental health. The host said, "You can't keep giving if you're empty." The words jolted Evelyn awake. She looked at Liam playing with Legos, then out the window where rain fell steadily on the trees. She remembered loving yoga, gentle moves that relaxed her after teaching. She dreamed of traveling to the Oregon coast, watching waves crash on cliffs. So why was she giving it all up to please others? Kiev the next day, Evelyn called Daniel. With a soft but firm voice, she said, "I'll watch Liam 3 days a week. I need time for myself." Daniel paused, then replied, I'll figure it out with Sarah." Evelyn felt her heart lighten, not from saying no, but from putting herself first. She signed up for a senior yoga class at the community center on Hawthorne. At her first session, she awkwardly tried the bridge pose, but the laughter of new classmates warmed her. She bought a small pottery kit, shaping lumpy but meaningful bowls at her kitchen table. Those changes didn't make Evelyn selfish. She still loved Liam, still watched him when Daniel needed her. But she no longer let her life revolve around others. She realized her happiness mattered as much as her family's. One afternoon, she sat on the sofa, holding a hot tea, watching rain fall without guilt. She smiled, knowing she wasn't just a mother or grandmother. She was Evelyn, a woman who deserved to live fully. Stopping the sacrifice of her happiness didn't mean Evelyn turned her back on family. It was about rediscovering herself. Like Clara found her voice, Henry found connection, Maggie found health, and James found the present. If you're like Evelyn, try saying no once or take an hour for something you love. You're not a service machine. You're a person, and your happiness matters too. Start today, because you deserve it. Shia 6. Stop ignoring your own limits under Houston, Texas's blazing sun. Walter Luck. 69 stood in his garage, sweat dripping down his forehead. He was trying to lift a heavy toolbox to fix the leaking porch roof. After last week's storm, the clank of metal rang out as he hoisted it onto a shelf, but a sharp pain shot down his spine, forcing him to stop, hands braced against the wall, gasping. "I can still do it," Walter muttered, trying to convince himself. He didn't want to admit his body wasn't what it used to be. Not the man who once worked 12-hour shifts at the Baytown oil refinery, hauling heavy steel pipes without tiring. But now, at 69, Walter still ignored the signals his body sent, just because he feared being seen as weak. Walter grew up in a family in Houston's Alief area, where his parents taught him strength was the proudest trait. He carried that spirit through life, from refinery days, raising 3 kids to retirement, fixing everything around the house himself. When the porch roof leaked, he waved off a neighbor's offer to help. "I've got it. Don't need anyone." He didn't want his eldest son, Michael, now in Dallas, to think his dad was old or useless. But this time that stubbornness cost him. As he tried lifting the toolbox again, he slipped, crashing onto the concrete floor. Pain radiated from his back to his legs, and he lay there, helpless, for nearly an hour before crawling inside. Walter's disregard for his limits wasn't unusual in America. Many seniors like him believe admitting they can't do something signals failure. An NIH report says over 60% of people over 65 have pushed beyond their physical capacity, leading to preventable injuries. For Walter, it stemmed from pride. He didn't want to be seen as an old man needing help. He ignored persistent back pain, dizziness from standing too fast, and his doctor's advice from his last visit. "Slow down, Walter, or you'll wear yourself out." He'd laughed then. "I'm strong as an ox," but the garage fall made him rethink. The consequences of ignoring limits went beyond physical pain. After the fall, Walter was bedridden for a week, taking painkillers and using a cane to walk. He felt powerless, not from the injury, but from realizing he'd put himself there. He recalled mowing the lawn in 104-degree heat to prove he still had it, or lugging an old sofa upstairs despite his back's protests. Each time he told himself, if I stop, I lose to age. But now, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, he asked, when I can't even walk? Everything changed when Michael called from Dallas, after hearing about the fall from Walter's ex-wife. Dad, why didn't you call me? I could have come help, Michael said, voice full of worry. Walter snapped, I didn't want to bother anyone. But Michael replied, you're not a bother, I just want you healthy. That call kept Walter awake all night. He remembered his own father, who worked himself to exhaustion and died of a stroke at 71. Walter didn't want that path. He realized acknowledging limits wasn't weakness. It was protecting himself. The next day, Walter decided to change. He hired a roofer instead of fixing it himself, though it irked him to spend money. He was amazed when the job was done in hours. No pain involved. He saw his doctor, listening this time when he suggested light exercises to strengthen his back. Walter joined a senior exercise group at the community center near Westheimer. At his first session, he tried a simple leg lift, laughing when an older woman named Linda teased, you're doing fine, just don't fall again. For once, he felt at ease not proving anything. Those small changes paid off big. Walter stopped trying to do everything like he was 40. He asked Michael to help clean the garage one weekend, and they bonded over football talk while working. He took short walks around a leaf, using a cane when needed, feeling his body lighten. He saw rest wasn't defeat. It kept him healthy to enjoy family time. One afternoon, sitting outside, Walter watched kids play ball nearby and smiled. I'm still here, and that's enough. Stopping the denial of his limits didn't mean Walter gave up all activity. It was about accepting his body had changed. Like Clara accepted her voice, Henry accepted connection, Maggie accepted health, and James accepted the present. For Walter, it was how he preserved himself to live longer, more meaningfully. If you're like Walter, don't fear saying I need a break, or I need help. It's not failure, it's the strength of wisdom, and you deserve to enjoy old age without hurting yourself. Habit 7. Stop avoiding intimate relationships under Boulder, Colorado's clear blue sky. Susan Mitchell, 71, sat on a wooden bench in her backyard, gazing at the misty flatirons in the distance. Birds chirped, blending with the breeze rustling through tall pines, but Susan felt no peace. She'd lived alone in her small house on Pearl Street since her divorce 15 years ago, convincing herself love and closeness were no longer for her. I'm too old for that, she often told herself, dismissing thoughts of intimacy. When friends invited her to a book club or senior dating events, she laughed it off. I'm fine on my own. But deep down, she felt a void she dared not face. Susan hadn't always felt this way. She'd been an energetic freelance journalist, writing for Denver papers, and once had a happy marriage with her ex-husband David, before irreconcilable differences drove them apart. After the divorce, she focused on work and raising her only daughter, now married in California. But as she aged, Susan shied away from intimacy. She feared hurt again, judgment for seeking love at 71, and believed society had no room for such feelings in seniors. She told herself closeness was for the young, a common bias in America, where culture often ties sex and love to youth. But that avoidance was quietly distancing Susan from herself. She didn't realize intimacy, emotional or physical, could still bring joy and meaning, no matter her age. One evening, cleaning her bookshelf, Susan found an old photo, her and David embracing atop the Rockies, beaming under summer sun. He stirred memories of warm moments, connections she'd cherished. Now, she slept alone in a cold bed, with no one to share end-of-day stories. She wondered, don't I deserve that anymore? Per AARP, over 35% of Americans over 65 avoid intimacy due to societal stigma, missing out on health and emotional benefits closeness offers. Susan's avoidance wasn't just emotional, it affected her body too. NIH studies show intimacy, including sex, reduces stress, boosts immunity, and improves heart health by releasing endorphins and oxytocin, happy hormones. Susan once felt her heart race, joking with David, but now she just felt tired and empty. She didn't know giving up closeness was costing her a natural vitality source. At a checkup, her doctor asked, "Any relationships? It's good for you." Susan blushed, shaking her head. "I'm past that." But his skeptical look made her reconsider. Everything changed one afternoon when Susan joined a book club at Boulder's public library. Reluctantly, after a friend's pleading. The topic was a romance novel, and during discussion, she met Robert, a 74-year-old with a kind smile and bright eyes. Robert spoke passionately about the protagonist, and when he asked Susan's opinion, she surprised herself by answering naturally. After, he invited her for coffee at a small shop on Walnut. She hesitated, then nodded. Just this once. The talk stretched 2 hours, from books to hikes they'd both loved. For the first time in years, Susan's heart raced, not from nerves, but connection. From there, Susan opened up. She and Robert met more often, reading together, strolling Chautauqua Park beneath the Flatirons. One evening, as Robert held her hand watching the sunset, Susan felt warmth spread, a sensation she thought was gone forever. She surprised herself by not pulling back, giving Robert a light kiss on the cheek. Simple but meaningful. She realized intimacy at this age wasn't like her 30s. It didn't need rush or perfection, just honest sharing between two souls. Robert laughed. "Who says we're too old for this?" Susan chuckled, feeling a freedom she hadn't thought possible. Those changes didn't just bring joy. Susan felt healthier, deeper sleep, lighter mood. She read an AARP article about intimacy's benefits in old age, amazed it could lower depression risk and extend life. She stopped feeling ashamed of love or closeness, accepting it as a natural human part, whatever the age. One day she video called her daughter in California, beaming about Robert. Her daughter teased, "Mom's in love?" Susan blushed. Maybe. Stopping the avoidance of intimacy didn't mean Susan jumped blindly into romance. It was about letting herself feel, like Clara found her voice. Henry found connection. Maggie found health. James found the present. And Walter found limits. For Susan, it was reclaiming vitality in her heart. If you're like Susan, don't see age as a barrier. Try opening up. A chat, a handhold, or just a smile at someone. Intimacy has no expiration, and you deserve it, even in these golden years. The story of Clara, Henry, Maggie, James, Evelyn, Walter, and Susan reflects the challenges and opportunities seniors face in today's United States. In a modern society where technology, family pressures, and cultural biases often shape life, Clara in Asheville refusing to sell her house shows that in 2025 America, with skyrocketing real estate and kids' pressure, seniors need to hold firm to protect their personal rights. A key lesson when society sometimes views them as burdens. Henry in Boise escaping isolation through the Veterans Group highlights America's rising loneliness.